Eva Kor was an unusual woman, not because she was a survivor of the Holocaust, but because she was unusual even for a survivor of the Holocaust. She was a twin, and she and her sister both underwent experiments by the Nazi doctors there in Auschwitz. In 2018, a film was released about Eva Kor's life and the fact that she was able to forgive the Nazis, and particularly a Nazi doctor that she met and even, you might say, befriended 48 years after the actual Holocaust. She sat down with me for 10 minutes and gave me a very brief and uncomplicated version of the events that led her to forgive that Nazi doctor and essentially all of the Nazis, though they did experiments that resulted in the death of her twin sister. The next year, Eva Kor died at the age of 85, just miles from Auschwitz. She had been on a tour helping people understand what Holocaust survivors went through and what the people who died there in Auschwitz went through. This is the interview. So, over 20 years ago, you decided to grant amnesty to the Nazis and forgive them. Was there a measure of faith involved in that?
No, none whatsoever. It's not religion, it's not faith. It is the strangest occurrence that happened, which, if anybody would look at it, you might think there was some kind of godly intervention, because I can't explain it any other way. My sister died, and I was, a month after she died, unrelated to her death, I was contacted by a professor from Boston College who wanted me to come to speak to his group, and I agreed. And then he said to me, it would be nice if you could bring with you a Nazi doctor. That was an interesting idea, and I said kind of jokingly, where do you think I can find one of those guys? They are not advertising in the telephone book. So I said, that's nice. And we laughed, and he said, well, I want you to keep working on that. And as I remembered, as he insisted, I did work on it, and I remembered that there was a documentary done when my sister was alive in 92. She died in 93. And in that documentary done by a German television, when I got the film, there was a Nazi doctor interviewed. So I said, wow, maybe he still is alive. I got his telephone number, I called him, and I wanted him to come to Boston. He said, no, I am not going to Boston, but I am willing to meet with you at my house in Germany. That was also interesting, that I am going to meet a Nazi doctor face to face. And that was in 1993. It was not 50 years, it was 48 years after liberation. I was very nervous when I went to meet him, because suddenly I realized that what I remembered, it was very, very difficult and very nerve-wracking. And what I remembered is that how I felt, and I was used as a human guinea pig, which wasn't comfortable. But I was curious, and I was also curious why he was willing to meet with me. He was very kind, he was very compassionate, and was treating with respect. And he was definitely a nice guy. He made me feel comfortable in his company. We finished the interview that we were going to use, and then we were sitting around as the camera people were wrapping up everything, and suddenly I wasn't even aware how my mind was working, but I heard myself say, you were in Auschwitz, right? Have you ever walked by the gas chamber? Have you ever gone inside it? Do you know how they operate? And he said, yes. And this is a nightmare that I live with. And he went on describing the operation of the gas chamber. And he said when everybody was dead, he was looking through a peephole. He signed a death certificate, no names, just the number of people that were murdered. So they were documenting every gas chamber operation by signing a document of how many people were killed. That I never knew about it. None of the people working in the Thunder Commando knew about it. This was strictly a Nazi operation. So I thought that it would be very good if he could go with me to Auschwitz for the 50th anniversary and sign a document, just what he told me about this document, death certificate that he was signing when people were dead. He said he would love to. So now I am getting back to Terre Haute, Indiana, realizing that I will have an original document signed by a Nazi doctor who witnessed what was going on. So I thought that was very, very good. I mean, I didn't know I was going to get that far. I wanted to thank this Nazi doctor for his willingness to go with me to Auschwitz and document the operation of the gas chamber. In my own mind, I knew that was kind of strange to thank a Nazi, but I felt very strongly that because he was willing to do it, so I didn't tell anybody about it, because I was afraid that my friends would talk me out of it, and I didn't want to be talked out of it. I liked that idea. So I was on my own for 10 months trying to figure out, I brainstormed every day, trying to figure out how can I thank him, and after 10 months a simple idea came up. How about a letter of forgiveness from me to him?
And some people would say, that's just next to impossible. How could you possibly do that? But you somehow found it inside yourself to do it.
I do not understand that whole event. In a logical mind, it didn't make sense to me. But when it popped into my head, I liked the idea that I could give him a gift of thanks for willing to document the gas chamber. That was because there was no documentation of the gas chamber that I could show anybody. So now if I met people who were denying the Holocaust, I could take that document and shove it in their face.
Before, and I think one thing the film shows, before this happened, before you were able to forgive this doctor and the Nazis, there were some rough patches from 1945 to 1995. Were you an angry person?
I was very angry. I was very angry with many people. I was in a lot of pain, and the fact is that most people are willing to pay lip service to victims, but they are not really willing to sit down and help them. That takes a little bit more. And definitely were not willing to help me with my problems. So we were the only children who survived Auschwitz. But our problems were so much more complicated than the grown-ups because we were used in experiments. And obviously, my sister died as a result of it. I have also some problems, and many of the twins, when they finally could meet and could talk to one another what their problems were. So our situation was different, and the average survivor did not understand us. Not only did we lose our childhood and the people in our lives, but we lost our ability to function as healthy human beings.
Something I've wondered about is how you came to settle in Indiana.
I was in Israel after the war. We were in Romania for 5 years under communist regimes, and we escaped Romania. I was in Israel for 10 years. 2 years I was in an agricultural school, and then I was in the Israeli army stationed in Tel Aviv. I liked the fact that I was in Tel Aviv. I stayed in the army 8 years, reaching the rank of sergeant major. In 1960, I met and married a tourist from Terre Haute, Indiana, who came to Israel, to Tel Aviv, to meet with his brother that he has not seen since the war ended. So that is the way I met him. My husband was liberated from Buchenwald by Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Neff from Terre Haute, Indiana, and he never wanted to live anywhere else but in Terre Haute where his liberator lived. So when I married him, we came from Tel Aviv to Terre Haute. And the only thing these two cities had in common, they both begin with the letter T. Otherwise, there was no connection.
Well, I think they're going to make me wrap it up here very soon. We had 10-minute slots, but this has been an incredible 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.